I'm Isabel Hardman, and my book, Why We Get the Wrong Politicians, looks at the problems with our politics in this country. It's not a rogues gallery of all the MPs I've met whilst being a political journalist who I don't like or I find annoying, but it actually looks at the political system, it looks at how people get into politics, it looks at how much they know about legislation before they start looking at it. And I've really discovered that even though I'm quite defensive of politicians individually, I think generally they're in it for the right reasons, or at least the same mixture of motives that the rest of us have for doing our jobs, that actually Parliament is dysfunctional and it is letting people down and it is producing policies which can cause catastrophes in voters' lives. So, for instance, it costs on average around £11,000 of your own money to stand for Parliament. That's not the money that parties spend on leaflets and so on, but the cost of standing, the cost of having to give up your job and work for free for maybe up to 2 years just to have the chance of becoming an MP, which makes it the most expensive and time-consuming job interview in the world. I've also looked at the way bills move through Parliament. So you'd expect that MPs would spend most of their time looking at the laws that the government's making to make sure that they work. At least that's what I expected when I started as a political journalist. But what I've discovered is that there's much more theatre to it, and that really MPs in the governing party will go into a bill committee, for instance, which is supposed to do line-by-line scrutiny of legislation, and they will vote just how their whips from the governing party tell them to vote, which means that even if a piece of legislation is really poorly drafted and is going to have terrible consequences for ordinary people, and we can all think of examples of those bills, those MPs will still support that legislation just because they've been told that their job is to get it through Parliament quickly and without much trouble. And that's a real scandal, I think, that we have bills, for instance, on legal aid or welfare reform, and I've looked at some of those in the book, that are going through that, and MPs do not know what their implications actually are until the crises turn up in their constituency surgeries. And then they then go back to Parliament and say, this terrible thing has happened. Well, actually, they were the ones who voted on it in the first place. I also look at MPs' personal lives and how miserable it can actually be to be an MP. They have a very high rate of relationship breakdown, very high rate of mental illness, to the extent that the parliamentary authorities have set up a special psychiatric service for MPs because there are so many problems. Again, addictions are a real problem. And if you're watching this and thinking, well, why on earth should I feel sorry for MPs? They've chosen to do this. They're the fools who are doing this stupid job. I can get on with my job and be a bit more normal. Then you should at least feel sorry for yourself, because people who are going through these crises will naturally find it harder to concentrate on their jobs, and therefore we will end up with worse laws as a result, and they will affect all of us, not MPs. At the end of the book, I do propose some solutions as well. I don't just leave you feeling incredibly miserable at the state of our politics, and I think there are changes that can be made to Parliament, to the structure and the culture of Parliament, that would mean we get much better policies and better politicians. And I really hope that people who read this book will feel galvanised, maybe not to become MPs, perhaps they might be put off from that, but to see change in the political system so that we aren't so angry with our MPs and we aren't so frequently disappointed with what they produce on our behalf.